Today, we'll be discussing 10 US presidents who had strong racist biases against black slaves, their actions, and the impact they had on the system of slavery. We'll also explore the journey to the first black president, Barack Obama. Let's get started. But before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more videos like this. George Washington, 1789 to 1797. Our first president had a dark side. He owned slaves, even when he was leading the country. He helped pass the 1787 Northwest Ordinance, which outlawed slavery in the new lands north of the Ohio River. But he stayed silent on the issue of slavery in America, which divided the nation. George Washington was a slave owner for most of his life. He got his first slaves when he was only 11 years old, and he kept buying, marrying, and breeding more. He had about 317 slaves when he died in 1799. He had some doubts about slavery, but he never said anything publicly or freed his slaves while he was alive. As president, he signed the 1787 Northwest Ordinance, which banned slavery in the new territories, but not in the old states where it was legal. He also signed the 1793 Fugitive Slave Act, which forced people to return runaway slaves to their masters. Washington's role as a slaveholder has caused a lot of arguments and anger among historians and the public. Thomas Jefferson, 1801 to 1809. Thomas Jefferson, the third president, had more than 600 slaves under his control. Even though he kept slaves all his life, Jefferson often spoke out against slavery and tried to limit its growth. Thomas Jefferson was one of the brave men who founded the United States and wrote the Declaration of Independence, which declared the rights of life, liberty, and happiness. He was the third president of the United States from 1801 to 1809, and during his time, he made the Louisiana Purchase, which made the country twice as big, and the Lewis and Clark Expedition, which discovered the new land. He also started the University of Virginia, which he planned and built on his property, Monticello. But Jefferson's legacy is also stained by his conflicting views and actions on slavery. He had more than 600 slaves in his lifetime, some of whom were his own kids with his slave lover, Sally Hemings. Even though he kept slaves all his life, Jefferson often spoke out against slavery and tried to limit its growth in the new states. He also suggested gradual freedom and relocation plans, but none of them worked out. Jefferson's complicated and disputed relationship with slavery has been the topic of much discussion and criticism by historians and scholars. Andrew Jackson, 1829 to 1837. When Andrew Jackson became the 7th President of the United States in 1828, he had a terrible plan to get rid of the Native Americans who lived in the southeast region of the United States. He wanted to move them to a place far away across the Mississippi River where they would have no connection to their land, culture, or history. He didn't care that some people in Congress and the Supreme Court tried to stop him. He just signed a law called the Indian Removal Act of 1830 and started to kick out the Native Americans from their homes. He did this to many nations, like the Cherokee, Creek, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Seminole. He made them walk for hundreds of miles to a place called the Indian Territory, now Oklahoma. He didn't care if they had enough food, water, or medicine. He didn't care if they were sick, tired, or cold. He didn't care if they lived or died. Many of them died on the way, especially the Cherokee, who had to suffer a terrible journey that people called the Trail of Tears. It was one of the saddest and most shameful things that ever happened in American history. It was a crime against the Native Americans who had the right to live in peace and freedom on their own land. Rutherford Hayes, 1877 to 1881. Rutherford Hayes became the 19th President of the United States after a controversial election that was settled by a deal in 1877. This deal put an end to the Reconstruction era, which had tried to protect the rights of African Americans after the Civil War. Hayes had been against slavery and for civil rights in his past, but he gave in to the deal and pulled out the Federal soldiers from the South. This left the former slaves helpless against the hateful groups like the Ku Klux Klan, who hurt and mistreated them with cruelty and prejudice. Many historians have blamed Hayes for betraying the fight for racial justice and letting the Jim Crow system take over the South. William McKinley, 1897 to 1901. William McKinley became the 25th President of the United States on March 4, 1897, but his life was cut short by an assassin's bullet on September 14, 1901. He was a Republican who guided the country to triumph in the Spanish-American War of 1898 and boosted American industry with high tariffs. In his first inaugural speech, he praised the idea of equal rights for everyone and said, "Lynchings must not be tolerated in a great and civilized country like the United States." Yet, he did nothing when white supremacists in Wilmington, North Carolina, overthrew all black elected officials and murdered at least 60 blacks in what is known as the Wilmington Massacre. McKinley's silence was a stab in the back for many African Americans who had voted for him in the 1896 election and a sign of the Republican Party's desertion of Reconstruction policies. Theodore Rooseveldt, 1901 to 1909. Theodore Roosevelt had complicated and conflicting feelings about race. He grew up believing that white people from Europe were naturally better than other races and could rule over them. He wanted America to grow bigger and stronger, and he thought he was helping the lower races by bringing them culture and development. He also agreed with the idea of breeding and sterilizing people who were seen as unfit or unwanted. But he also saw that people of any race could work hard and succeed on their own. He made history by having Booker T. Washington, a famous black leader, over for dinner at the White House. He stood up for the rights of black Americans to have a voice and a fair chance. He also supported education for everyone, and he valued the diversity and richness that immigrants and ethnic groups brought to America. He felt that people of different races should get along and work together for the good of the nation. Abraham Lincoln, 1861 to 1865. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president, made a bold move when he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which announced that from January 1st, 1863, all enslaved people in the states that were fighting against the Union would be free forever. But Lincoln, whose Emancipation Proclamation was more of a gesture than a real change, despised slavery, but never saw blacks as equal to whites. He is widely admired as one of the best presidents in American history as he guided the nation through the Civil War, the most brutal and bitter struggle in its history. He also had a key role in ending slavery, issuing the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, which stated that all enslaved people in the states that were rebelling against the Union would be free from that day on. But Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation didn't apply to the border states that stayed loyal to the Union, or to the parts of the Confederacy that were already under Union control. So it didn't really affect the lives of most enslaved people, and it didn't get rid of slavery as a system. Lincoln's main reason for issuing the proclamation was to weaken the Confederate war effort by urging enslaved people to escape to the Union lines and by stopping foreign countries from helping the South. Lincoln also hoped that the proclamation would motivate more people in the North to back the war and that it would open the way for a constitutional amendment to end slavery for good. Even though Lincoln hated slavery and thought it was a moral wrong, he didn't think that black people were equal to white people in every way. He shared racist views that were common in his time, such as the idea that black people were less smart and that they couldn't live peacefully with white people in the same society. He also didn't want to give black people the right to vote, serve on juries, or hold public office. He liked the idea of sending black people to Africa or Central America, where they could set up their own independent countries. But Lincoln's views on race changed over time as he met with black leaders, soldiers, and activists, and as he saw the bravery and sacrifice of black people in the war. he slowly came to respect the humanity and dignity of black people and to support some level of civil and political rights for them. He also gave up on his colonization plans and instead backed the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery throughout the United States. He also supported the 14th Amendment, which gave citizenship and equal protection to all people born or naturalized in the United States, no matter what race. He also said he was willing to think about giving the right to vote to some black men, such as those who fought in the Union Army or those who were very smart. But Lincoln didn't live to see the full effect of these amendments, as he was killed by John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate supporter, on April 14, 1865, just 5 days after the end of the Civil War. Barack Obama, 2009 to 2017. Fast forward to the 21st century, Barack Obama, the 44th President of the United States and the first African-American president, was elected over Senator John McCain of Arizona on November 4, 2008. Obama's captivating personality, powerful speeches, and his vow to transform the old political system appealed to many Democrats, especially young and minority voters. During his 8 years in office, Obama overcame many obstacles, such as the Great Recession, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the threat of terrorism, and the division of American politics. He also accomplished many feats, such as passing the Affordable Care Act, which gave health insurance to millions of Americans, ordering the raid that ended Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, negotiating the Iran nuclear deal, which stopped Iran from making nuclear weapons, and supporting the legalization of same-sex marriage, which gave equal rights to LGBT couples. Obama received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009 for his work to foster international cooperation and diplomacy. He also became a global symbol of hope and progress, inspiring millions of people around the world with his vision of a more inclusive and diverse America. This journey through the presidencies shows us the complex and often troubling relationship between the highest office in the land and the institution of slavery. It also highlights the progress we've made as a nation, culminating in the election of our first black president, Barack Obama. Thank you for joining us on this historical journey. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. See you in the next video.